I just like that because she made me so mad. And I just couldn't with her. And she was just going, please don't, please don't. I said, shut up, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want you to talk to me. I said, I just want to find some way to get out of this. I said, it's gone too far.
I would like to see her killed and not go on living with taxpayers' money paying for her to live.
Order that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And further, on the 12th day of January, 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by sufficient current of electricity. Oh God, have mercy upon you. Mr. Bates, take Mr. Pike into the office.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Ms. Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just love my mom.
Please hold Ms. Pike in the dock.
I love you. I love you too.
Welcome to Dark Diaries, where we uncover the darkest corners of true crime. Today, we explore the chilling story of Christa Pike, the youngest woman ever sentenced to death in the US. In 1995, an 18-year-old Christa, driven by jealousy and rage, led a gruesome attack on fellow student Colleen Slemmer. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation, leaving behind a haunting tale of obsession, manipulation, and innocence lost. What compels someone so young to commit such a horrifying act? Stay tuned as we unravel the shocking details of this harrowing case. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Dark Diaries. Christa Pike was born on March 10, 1976, in Beckley, West Virginia, to Emil Glenn Pike and Carissa Hansen. From the very beginning, her childhood was marked by neglect. Her mother, described as more interested in partying and drinking than in raising her child, left much of Christa's care unattended. Meanwhile, her father showed little involvement in her life. It wasn't long before her parents abandoned her entirely, sending her to live with her paternal grandmother. Life in her parents' household had been far from ideal. According to a relative, the environment was so neglectful that baby Christa would often crawl through uncleaned piles of dog feces. Even when she began having seizures as an infant, her parents seemed indifferent, too absorbed in their arguments to address her medical needs. Living with her grandmother brought some stability to Christa's life, offering her a sense of safety and care she had not known before. However, this sense of security was shattered in 1988 when her grandmother passed away. Christa was only 12 at the time, and the loss was devastating. The only person who had shown her consistent love and care was gone, leaving Christa to return to her parents' home. There, the cycle of neglect and abuse resumed, this time compounded by both emotional and physical mistreatment. For Christa, it was a return to the chaos and abandonment that had defined her early years, shaping the troubled path her life would ultimately take. Her own mother was the one who introduced substances to her during her early teens. The young girl was thrust into a life marked by poverty, addiction, and constant family instability. This instability was worsened by her parents' tumultuous relationship, repeatedly breaking up and reconciling. It's no surprise that during this time, Christa made her first attempt to end her life, feeling it was her only escape. When the attempt failed, her situation worsened. Rather than addressing her daughter's struggles, Christa's mother left her to the care of a new stepfather who vented his frustrations through physical abuse, often using a belt. The only solace Christa found was during moments of smoking weed with her mother, as it briefly allowed for a semblance of a friendly bond between them. Those moments of peace were fleeting, and for the most part, the troubled teen was left to do whatever she could to survive. She often roamed the streets to avoid her stepfather or stayed temporarily with her biological father. However, staying with her father offered little relief, as their relationship was strained due to his long absence during her childhood. When Christa frequently broke his rules, he would send her back to her mother, restarting the cycle of abuse all over again. The abuse wasn't limited to her mother's home. Allegations surfaced regarding incidents at her father's house, including claims that he had inappropriately touched her. These accusations were never confirmed, and although one of her stepsisters also accused him of abuse, many who knew Christa at the time labeled her a habitual liar, urging skepticism about her specific claims. Regardless of the truth of those allegations, the other documented instances of abuse and neglect are undeniable. These hardships likely played a role in Christa's behavioral issues and acting out at school. By her mid-teens, Christa's life had become so chaotic that she dropped out of school entirely. With no stability or sense of direction, her behavior spiraled further out of control, and she began frequently getting into trouble with the law. While many of her offenses were minor, like shoplifting, there were also more serious incidents, such as the time she and a friend assaulted a man in a parking lot after he allegedly called her and made threats of sexual assault. By the 10th grade, her escalating behavior resulted in her being sent to a juvenile detention facility for a year. Surprisingly, this time in detention seemed to have a positive impact. While there, Christa developed an interest in the Job Corps, a government program designed to assist low-income youth aged 16 to 24 by providing vocational training and career development opportunities. At the time, Christa had set her sights on becoming a nursing technician, following in her mother's footsteps, who had worked in the field for years. Despite their strained and tumultuous relationship, Christa seemed drawn to the profession, perhaps seeking a sense of stability or even validation by emulating someone who had such a profound, albeit negative, impact on her life. At 18, she enrolled in the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee, to pursue her dream and gain the vocational training needed to enter the medical field. However, her time at Job Corps began an even darker period. In the fall of 1994, she met 17-year-old Tadderil Shipp. What began as a casual friendship quickly evolved into an intense and all-consuming romance. The two became inseparable, bonding over their shared struggles and troubled pasts, but this connection soon proved toxic and destructive. Tadderil had faced significant challenges of his own. After dropping out of school in the 9th grade, he became involved with local street gangs, participating in petty crimes like theft and vandalism. Despite his criminal behavior, Tadderil's mother was a stabilizing influence in his life. Determined to help her son escape the streets, she convinced him to enroll in the Job Corps program in Knoxville, where he joined the culinary arts program to build a future in the food service industry. This was a chance for him to leave behind his troubled past, much like Christa sought through her nursing aspirations. When Tadderil and Christa met, their similar backgrounds created an instant connection. Both had experienced instability, neglect, and rebellion, and they quickly developed an intense attachment. Yet instead of encouraging one another to focus on their studies and build better futures, their relationship became a toxic cycle of codependency. They began spending most of their time together, often neglecting their training programs and getting into trouble. Their shared pain and reckless behavior created a volatile dynamic. They fueled each other's worst tendencies, with Christa's rebellious nature and Tadderil's familiarity with criminal activity amplifying their destructive paths. This toxic relationship would not only derail their opportunities at Job Corps, but also set the stage for a series of decisions that would take both of them down a tragic and criminal spiral. What could have been a turning point for them, an opportunity to leave their troubled pasts behind, became the catalyst for a series of dark and irreversible events, with their relationship serving as the spark for what was to come. Their troubles didn't stop at petty crimes. They also developed a growing obsession with the occult. This footage is from the exact place where Christa Pike and her followers practice satanic rituals. While this might have been a harmless curiosity for many young people, for Christa and Tadderil, it became an extremely dangerous fixation. To them, the occult wasn't just a hobby or a passing interest, it was a serious pursuit. They saw it as a way to channel the forces of darkness, to inflict pain and suffering on their perceived enemies. Given Christa's background, it would be easy to assume her targets might have been her parents or stepfather. After all, her mother had neglected her throughout her life, her father had allegedly sexually abused her, and her stepfather had subjected her to physical abuse. However, Christa seemed to no longer focus her anger on them. Instead, her rage would eventually turn toward someone unexpected, Colleen Slemmer, a 19-year-old peer at the Knoxville Job Corps. Before things escalated with Colleen, Christa and Tadderil expanded their circle to include Shadola Peterson, another Job Corps student with a shared interest in the occult. Shadola quickly became a close companion of the couple, forming a trio bound by their dark fascination. Together they frequently spoke about their practices in public, and their discussions soon went far beyond casual spells or rituals. According to classmates, they openly talked about human sacrifice, something most dismissed as typical goth posturing or edgy talk. But what no one realized was just how serious they were about their intentions. This was when Colleen Slemmer entered the picture, unknowingly becoming the focal point of Christa's growing wrath and the trio's sinister plans. What began as whispers about the occult and dark rituals would soon escalate into something far more horrifying, proving to be far more dangerous than anyone around them could have imagined. Colleen Slemmer, originally from Jacksonville, Florida, had enrolled at the Knoxville Job Corps to study computer technology. She ran in entirely different social circles than Christa Pike, Tadderil Shipp, and Shadola Peterson, and under normal circumstances their paths might never have crossed. However, a rumor began circulating that Colleen had a secret crush on Tadderil and had even convinced him to cheat on Christa. It's unclear where the rumor originated. It could have been a classic case of schoolyard gossip spiraling out of control. When Christa confronted Tadderil about it, he denied the accusations outright, insisting he was completely devoted to her. Shadola also backed him up, reassuring Christa that Tadderil would never betray her. Convinced that Colleen had started the rumors to sabotage her relationship, Christa became fixated on seeking revenge. Christa's first move was to confront Colleen directly, demanding to know her intentions with Tadderil. Colleen, along with those who knew her, adamantly denied any involvement or interest in him. She claimed she was just as shocked as anyone when the rumors began circulating. But Christa, already fiercely possessive of Tadderil due to her deep reliance on him, refused to believe her. In Christa's mind, Colleen had not only tried to steal her boyfriend, but also threatened the fragile sense of security she had in her life. Determined to send a clear message to Colleen and anyone else who might try to come between her and Tadderil, Christa devised a plan to make an example of her. This wasn't going to be a simple warning or a confrontation. Christa decided the situation called for something far more extreme. She convinced Tadderil and Shadola that they needed to sacrifice Colleen as part of a satanic ritual. Whether their interest in the occult had been merely a fascination up until then, it now became deadly serious. On January 11th, 1995, Christa shared her sinister plan with another friend, Kim Iolio. By that point, the idea had taken full form in her mind. Christa was no longer content to settle matters with words. She intended to turn her obsession with the occult into a horrifying reality, dragging Tadderil and Shadola down with her in a plot that would lead to disastrous and tragic consequences for everyone involved. At the time, Kim dismissed Christa's chilling remarks as nothing more than angry venting, assuming they were empty words fueled by frustration. Unfortunately, Kim's skepticism couldn't have been more misplaced. Christa was dead serious, and by then she had convinced Tadaro and Shadola to share in her grim vision. The trio's next move was to isolate Colleen, ensuring they could have her alone for as long as they wanted. To do this, they concocted a plan to lure her away from the Job Corps campus on the evening of January 12, 1995. Pretending to seek a truce, they invited Colleen to join them for a peace offering, an evening of smoking weed together at an abandoned steam plant nearby. But peace was never their intention. The true goal was revenge, carried out in the most brutal way imaginable. At around 8 p.m., all four signed out of their dormitory and ventured into the woods along a dark jogging trail. Once they reached a secluded area, Christa wasted no time confronting Colleen, accusing her again of trying to seduce Tadaro. Colleen vehemently denied the accusations, insisting there was no truth to the rumors. But Christa had already made up her mind, and no amount of pleading or explanation could change her conviction. To Christa, every word out of Colleen's mouth was just another lie, fueling her already boiling rage. Overwhelmed with fury, Christa pulled a box cutter and a small meat cleaver, items she had stolen from the dorms earlier that day, from her pocket. She forced Colleen to remove her shirt and bra, then delivered a knee to her face, knocking her to the ground. What followed was a horrifying escalation. Christa began slashing at Colleen's stomach with the cleaver, and Tadaro joined in, stabbing her chest with the box cutter. Meanwhile, Shadola acted as a lookout, ensuring no one stumbled upon the gruesome scene. With her standing guard, Christa and Tadaro felt free to continue their brutal assault. For 30 to 40 minutes, they stabbed, slashed, and inflicted unimaginable pain on Colleen. Her desperate pleas for mercy, offering to leave Tennessee and never return, fell on deaf ears. No amount of screaming or begging could move her attackers. Their secluded location ensured no one heard her cries for help. Despite the relentless assault, Colleen clung to life, barely holding on after enduring nearly 3/4 of an hour of torment. Tragically, she was still conscious when Christa and Tadaro decided to carve a pentagram into her chest, a grotesque act meant to symbolize the ritualistic nature of their so-called satanic sacrifice. When the pair decided they had done enough to fulfill their twisted revenge and dark ritual, Christa delivered the final blow. Picking up a chunk of asphalt from the ground, she smashed Colleen's head repeatedly until the gurgling sounds of her choking on her own blood ceased, and she took her last breath. Even death didn't satisfy Christa's rage. In one final act of desecration, she reached into Colleen's shattered skull and removed a piece of bone, a macabre trophy of the senseless brutality that had just unfolded. After securing her gruesome trophy, Christa tucked the fragment of Colleen's skull into her jacket pocket. She and her accomplices left Colleen's lifeless body under a haphazard pile of leaves and calmly returned to their dormitory, acting as though nothing unusual had occurred. However, their attempt to maintain a facade of normalcy quickly unraveled. Witnesses had seen all four leave together earlier that evening, but noticed that only 3 returned. Perhaps emboldened by this, Christa made no effort to conceal her actions. Instead, she openly boasted to her friend Kim about the murder she had just committed. At first, Kim dismissed Christa's claims as a sick joke, but any doubt evaporated when Christa pulled out the skull fragment she had hidden in her jacket and proudly displayed it. Despite this horrifying proof, Kim chose not to go to the police. Her reasons remain unclear. Perhaps it was fear of retaliation from someone so clearly unhinged. After all, Christa was gleefully recounting the details of her crime, smiling and even dancing as she described the brutal events of the night before. Christa's chilling lack of remorse didn't stop there. The following day, she shared her story with another classmate, Stephanie Wilson, who also got a glimpse of the skull fragment. Christa made her bragging even more grotesque by pointing to brown stains on her shoes and coldly stating, "That ain't mud on my shoes, that's blood." Despite Christa's admissions and the mounting evidence, neither of her confidants reported her to the authorities. Their silence, whether motivated by fear or shock, ultimately didn't matter. The careless disposal of Colleen's body ensured it was only a matter of time before the gruesome crime was uncovered. That moment came on January 13th, when an employee at the Job Corps agricultural campus stumbled upon Colleen's remains. Horrified, they immediately contacted both the Knoxville Police Department and the University of Tennessee Police Department. Responding officers arrived at the scene to find a deeply disturbing sight. Colleen's body lay partially hidden, nude from the waist up, with her throat slashed and her head so severely bludgeoned that identifying her was initially challenging. Her body bore over 300 slash wounds, a testament to the prolonged torture she had endured. The medical examiner later confirmed that Colleen had died from blunt force trauma to the head, but the extent of her injuries made it clear she had been subjected to a prolonged and agonizing ordeal before her death. The murder of Colleen Slemmer was not only brutal, but also appeared to be premeditated. Officer Terry Johnson later described the scene as one of savage violence. The victim had been viciously mutilated while still alive, evidenced by a large pool of blood located approximately 30 feet, 9 meters, from where her body was found. The pentagram carved into her chest, first noted by Detective Donald R. Cook, strongly suggested the killing was ritualistic.
The brutal murder of 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer created fear and speculation among students and staff Friday. Knoxville police quickly dispelled any myths about the case with a break in their investigation.
It did not involve a university student. It did not occur on the bike trail. It was not a random or a stranger-to-stranger incident.
Police say the murder suspects were close to the victim.
The motive of the crime appears to be a love triangle. It appears that both of the females involved had been involved with the 17-year-old male.
The victim's partially dressed body was found in this brushy area Friday morning. An autopsy confirmed she was slashed repeatedly with a meat cleaver and some other small cutting device, perhaps a razor blade or box opener. Authorities say she was then beaten over the head with a large chunk of asphalt from this pile.
Injuries that Christa Pike caused to be inflicted upon Colleen Slemmer are almost beyond description. It was at this location that Colleen Slemmer was actually pleading for her life, and Christa Pike showed her no mercy. The body of Colleen Slemmer ended up in this general area right over here.
She was dancing around in a circle.
Who was dancing around in the circle?
Christa.
Dancing around the circle while she was telling you about this?
Yes.
Was she doing anything else?
She was smiling.
Making any other noises or anything?
She was kind of singing la la la.
Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, the investigation progressed quickly, largely due to Christa Pike's shocking openness about her involvement. Her brazen admissions to multiple people left investigators with little doubt about the culprit. When criminal investigator Randy York questioned Christa, she confessed immediately, though she attempted to frame the killing as an accident. According to Christa, Colleen had been harassing her for weeks, even allegedly threatening her with a box cutter one night while she slept, claiming she'd kill her if she didn't give up to Darryl. Christa claimed the plan that night was merely to scare Colleen into leaving her boyfriend alone. She admitted they intended to leave Colleen with some scars as a reminder, but things spiraled out of control. When Colleen was too gravely injured, Christa claimed she decided to end her suffering by striking her on the head with a chunk of asphalt. However, Christa's justification didn't align with her behavior after the murder. Her gleeful recounting of the crime complete with smiling and dancing, contradicted her claim that it had been accidental. Further evidence made her story even less believable. Investigators found a piece of Colleen's skull in a jacket Christa had left in the school counselor's office. The discovery, combined with Christa's boasting and other evidence, pointed to a deliberate, premeditated kill. Evidence, Christa eventually admitted the truth. She had always intended to kill Colleen. She revealed that she hesitated briefly as Colleen begged for her life, her desperate words, particularly, "Why are you doing this to me?" almost breaking through Christa's resolve. But when Colleen tried to escape after a noise in the woods distracted her and Tadaro, Christa decided there was no turning back. It was then she struck Colleen repeatedly with the asphalt, ensuring her death. During the interrogation, Christa also implicated her accomplices Tadaro Shipp and Shadola Peterson in the murder. Christa's dorm room uncovered further incriminating evidence, including a pair of blood-soaked jeans and Colleen's ID card. With a full confession and overwhelming physical evidence, Christa, Tadaro, and Shadola were all arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The following clip shows Tadaro admitting to committing the heinous act.
Well, at first, I thought they just were scared. At first, from the jump, that's what I thought. But we got up there, everything changed. There was a picture that was cut on her chest. Who did that? I did half of that. All right, don't tell me what it was. It was satanic stuff.
Following the murder, Christa Pike, Tadaro Shipp, and Shadola Peterson began preparing for their trial. With such a wealth of evidence against them, mounting a viable defense would be an uphill battle. For Christa, the defense's primary strategy was to argue that her actions were a result of diminished mental capacity and borderline personality disorder. They attributed this to a troubled upbringing marked by abuse from her caregivers and early marijuana dependency. Further evidence presented by the defense included brain scans indicating Christa's underdeveloped frontal lobes, a condition they suggested was caused by her mother's heavy drinking during pregnancy. According to Dr. Jonathan Henry Pincus, this brain damage compromised her ability to discern right from wrong, making her incapable of full accountability for her actions. Dr. Pincus argued that Christa's background, a combination of brain damage, mental illness, and a history of abuse, aligned with common traits found in other killers, suggesting her life had been tragically predisposed to violence. The prosecution, however, countered these claims, maintaining that Christa's psychological and neurological issues did not justify or excuse the deliberate murder of Colleen Slemmer. They argued that Christa's supposed diminished capacity was overstated. Dr. Eric Engum, a clinical psychologist initially brought in to support the defense, admitted under cross-examination that while Christa exhibited traits of a severe personality disorder, she was not so dysfunctional as to require institutionalization. Her IQ of 111 and lack of symptoms indicating an inability to control her actions undermined any argument for an insanity defense. Dr. Engum did support Christa's original claim that the murder wasn't premeditated, but instead the result of a situation that spiraled out of control. He suggested that Christa's borderline personality disorder could explain her emotional instability and erratic behavior, such as dancing and boasting about the murder afterward as a form of emotional release. However, his claims were contradicted by evidence. Christa had brought deadly weapons to the scene and failed to reconsider her actions, even when an interruption during the attack provided a moment to stop. These factors suggested deliberation and awareness. The trial also explored the supposed ritualistic elements of the crime. Dr. William Burnett, an expert in occult practices, testified that while there were occult-like aspects, such as the pentagram carving and the killer's penchant for wearing pentagram necklaces, these were more likely examples of adolescent fascination with satanic imagery rather than genuine satanic worship. He described their behavior as adolescent dabbling in Satanism, more akin to a rebellious fashion statement than a serious religious practice. Dr. Burnett concluded that the crime was less about performing a ritual and more an act of collective aggression, in which a group becomes emotionally charged and engages in violent behavior. Whether the satanic elements were serious or superficial, it didn't change the facts. A gruesome murder had taken place, and the evidence demonstrated that the perpetrators acted with intent and awareness. Ultimately, the defense's attempts to portray Christa as mentally unfit or the murder as unplanned failed to counter the overwhelming evidence of premeditation and the trio's culpability. On March 22, 1996, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Christa Pike and Darryl Shipp were both found guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, while Shadola Peterson was convicted of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Sentencing remained the final step, but before it could proceed, additional testimony was heard.
Christa was born, she was spending a lot of time with her grandmother, and I wanted to be her friend, and I thought that maybe that would help us to be able to be closer together, so we did. She spanked her for everything. So I would go in and I would find this baby crawling around through piles of dog.
She was dancing around in a circle.
Who was dancing around in the circle?
Christa.
Dancing around the circle while she was telling you about this?
Yes.
Was she doing anything else?
She was smiling, kind of saying la la la.
This is the skull from the victim. This is a portion of skull.
And
obviously I already had the skull. I took the piece and...
The defense called Christa's aunt, Carrie Ross, as a character witness, hoping her words might sway the jury against the death penalty. Ross argued that Christa was a victim of her traumatic upbringing, which had left her deeply damaged. However, her testimony was undermined by the prosecution, which highlighted her prior description of Christa as a pathological liar and someone unsafe to be around children. Christa's parents, Glenn and Carissa, also testified on her behalf, attempting to paint her as a product of her environment. Under cross-examination, however, they were forced to acknowledge that Christa had exhibited manipulative and dangerous behavior long before the murder. Carissa recounted an incident from Christa's teenage years when she threatened her stepfather with a butcher knife, behavior that the prosecution argued demonstrated her violent tendencies independent of her troubled upbringing. The prosecution contended that while many endure abusive childhoods, the vast majority do not resort to violence, let alone murder. They portrayed Christa and her accomplices as dangerous individuals who could not be rehabilitated and whose crimes warranted the harshest punishments. Criminologist Catherine Ramsland supported this argument, testifying that individuals with borderline personality disorder are often resistant to treatment. She likened them to vampires who drain therapists and move on without significant progress. On March 30th, 1996, the jury delivered its sentences. Darryl Shipp received life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years, while Christa Pike was sentenced to death by electrocution, in addition to a 25-year sentence for conspiracy. Shadola Peterson, who had cooperated with the state and played a lesser role in the murder, received probation and avoided prison time altogether. Christa immediately announced her intention to appeal the death sentence, citing her mental health issues. Over the years, her defense team launched multiple appeals, often interrupted by Christa's shifting stance on her own punishment. At times, she expressed a desire to die, only to later push for freedom. However, her conduct in prison only strengthened the case against her. On August 24, 2001, Christa attempted to strangle fellow inmate Patricia Jones with a shoestring at the Tennessee Prison for Women, reportedly over a dispute involving a man they both had been interested in. Convicted of attempted first-degree murder, Christa showed no remorse. In a phone call to her mother, she described the attack in graphic detail, stating, "I wrapped that shoestring around her and tried to choke the life out of her. She was passed out on the ground, Mama, twitching, foaming at the mouth. If she gets near me again, I'm going to do it again." Further incriminating evidence surfaced in a letter Christa wrote to Taddarrell Shipp from prison. In it, she reminisced about the murder, writing, "You see what I get for trying to be nice to the I went ahead and bashed her brains out so she'd die quickly, and they fry me. Ain't that some shit? Love you for the rest of my life. Lil Devil." In March 2012, Christa's behavior escalated further when she attempted to escape prison. The plot involved her pen pal Donald Kohut and corrections officer Justin Heflin. The plan failed, resulting in Heflin's termination and Kohut facing legal consequences. For Christa, the failed escape attempt effectively crushed any remaining hope of securing her freedom. He had made the 1,800-mile journey from his home in Flemington, New Jersey, to visit Christa Pike several times before becoming entangled in her escape plan. For his involvement, he faced the harshest punishment, receiving a 7-year prison sentence. This incident reinforced the notion that Christa Pike's life seemed to engulf anyone near her in a vortex of misery and consequences. Despite this, her legal team remained optimistic about their chances of removing her from death row. They argued that her mental illness rendered her incapable of being fully responsible for her actions at the time of the murder. In pursuit of this, they filed yet another appeal in May 2014, followed by another in October 2019. Both were ultimately dismissed by the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. When these appeals failed, it seemed Christa's execution, scheduled for August 27, 2020, would proceed as planned. However, the global pandemic led to a delay, providing her legal team with just enough time to file yet another appeal to commute her death sentence. This effort, like the others, was rejected in July 2020. With all legal avenues seemingly exhausted, it appeared the end was finally near for Christa. Even Colleen Slemmer's mother, May Martinez, expressed a desire for closure, stating, "I want this to happen before I die, otherwise nobody will see justice." Yet, in November 2022, a new development offered a glimmer of hope. The Tennessee Supreme Court ruled that sentencing juveniles to life in prison without the possibility of parole was unconstitutional. This decision stemmed from a separate case involving Freddie Joe Booker, whose legal victory had far-reaching implications, forcing the reassessment of numerous prior convictions, including Christa Pike's. May is fighting for justice. In an interview, she urged for the execution so that Christa could never hurt anyone else again.
Now I'm fighting for justice. I want her either executed where she never can hurt another person or be alive and get things that she's not supposed to get. I want justice. I want Colleen to be, have justice for her. I think if she was out with general population, I think she would try to kill somebody else. I also think that shows a danger to me because she gets out, she can come after us. Being Colleen's voice and letting the people know and the court system know that what they did and how to get this stopped instead of letting us suffer as parents. They need to end this. This has dragged on long enough. Why she sat in and got her nails, her hair done. She makes phone calls. She's tried to escape. And has angels all over in her room. She has a life. She's not just on death row. I don't have support for justice. I've been fighting this alone. Tennessee has not even tried to offer or have help out there, have anyone talk to me at all. I haven't had any kind of a voice. I've been fighting and fighting. It's been 28 years. A lot. An awful lot. The piece that they took out of her head, where the fragment was, her head kind of like crumbled over the years and stuff. And when we put her on the airplane, I had to have FBI agents to take me through there, and I had to have the airport security or whoever they were to take. I had 6 people guarding me with this because you can't put it through the airport through the scanners or anything. So what we did was they put it in a brown box where she was and just put another box. So as we were driving home, it just kept falling apart and falling apart. And there's pieces everywhere. I will feel like she would be complete, but I also will feel like it ain't over with until Christa's not alive yet. I want her dead. I want her breathing another air. If they give the piece back to me, they don't have any evidence to fold her other than just the court hearings and stuff like that. Even though she admitted it and showed them where it was and danced at Colleen's site that they killed her at, she went up 30 minutes, 40 minutes later and was dancing around the the area where, in the park where she did it, and kept giggling with the police and said, "Do you know who did this?" and all that. And that's how they got her real, basically. She went up to a couple cops and kept saying, "Oh, who did that? Who's that?" And oh, they must have did a good job. And it was crazy. Yes. When they set the date to fight this appeal, I'm going to be there no matter what.
Christa's legal team seized this opportunity to argue that her original sentence should be vacated. Their appeal focused on Christa's age at the time of the crime, emphasizing that she was just 18 years old, barely past the threshold of adulthood, when the murder occurred. They contended that sentencing her to death was unconstitutional, particularly since Tadarrell Shipp, who was 17 at the time, had been tried as a juvenile and would soon be eligible for parole. In their words, if courts recognize that a 17-year-old cannot be subject to mandatory life sentences due to well-established adolescent brain science, it stands to reason that an 18-year-old should not face the death penalty. At the time of the crime, nearly 30 years ago, Christa Pike was an 18-year-old teenager with untreated severe mental illness and a history of repeated physical and sexual abuse, violence, and neglect beginning in early childhood. Her co-defendant, just a few months younger, will soon be eligible for parole. Yet Christa faces execution. Science tells us there is no meaningful difference between the brain of a 17-year-old and that of an 18-year-old. The trial court labeled her an adult, but brain science shows she was still, in many ways, a child. Christa's death sentence is arbitrary and she should not be executed, argues her advocates. This position has resonated with many as the line between childhood and adulthood is often blurred. At 18, was Christa truly an adult in terms of her psychological and emotional development? While no one disputes that she committed murder, the fact that someone only a few months younger who participated in the same crime was ineligible for the death penalty raises serious questions. Should she face the same fate? This debate gained further traction when the public was reminded that Christa is the youngest woman in the U.S. sentenced to death since Tennessee reinstated the practice in 1976. If her execution proceeds, she would become the first woman executed in Tennessee in over 200 years. This fact brought another contentious issue to light, allegations of sexism. Supporters pointed out that 8 men sentenced to death at 18 after her conviction later had their sentences commuted. However, critics dismissed this as an attempt to garner sympathy for someone who was murdered in cold blood, fully aware of her actions. Ultimately, this argument was rejected. In October of that year, Knox County Criminal Court Judge Scott Green denied Christa's request to stay her execution. Judge Green ruled that the precedent set by United States v. Booker which addressed juvenile offenders, did not apply to her. The Booker case addressed only juvenile offenders in Tennessee, he stated. This ruling applies only to juvenile homicide offenders, not adults. Since Christa was legally an adult when the murder occurred, her original conviction stood. Despite this, she has continued to advocate for clemency. Recently, she launched a website where she appeals for compassion based on her young age and psychological issues at the time of the crime. On the site, she claims to have changed fundamentally, writing, "I only want my situation to be looked at now through the eyes of logic instead of anger, and answer the question of if I deserve to die for a crime committed by 3 people. I'm not even close to being the same person I was over 25 years ago." Could this lead to a last-minute reprieve for Christa Pike? While unlikely, anything is possible. As of April 2024, no execution date has been set, leaving room for potential changes. The question of whether she deserves clemency remains divisive. Some argue that her age at the time, just 18, paired with an already damaged and underdeveloped brain, warrants life imprisonment rather than death. Others contend that her age doesn't absolve her actions and that her mental health issues do not excuse murder. This debate is likely to persist up to and beyond her eventual execution date. It also raises broader discussions about the roles of nature and nurture in shaping individuals like Christa. Was she destined to be a killer due to prenatal damage caused by her mother, or did her abusive upbringing mold her into someone capable of such violence? The truth may never be fully understood. While Christa portrays herself as a victim of circumstance, one juror from her original trial offered a chilling perspective. "She had an angel's face and a devil's heart." The story of Christa Pike is a chilling reminder of how dark paths can lead to unimaginable tragedy. What do you think? Can someone truly be redeemed after committing such acts? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this video intriguing, please like and subscribe. It's free and helps this small channel grow. And don't miss our next video, where we'll dive into the horrifying legend of Elizabeth Bathory, a 16th century noblewoman who killed over 600 young women to drink their blood and bathe in it, all in the name of preserving her youth. Thank you for watching Dark Diaries. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.